Welcome back to Meraki Unboxed. My name's Simon Thompson, your host for today, and it's episode 90. Can't believe how fast this is ticking along. This is the third episode in as many weeks because we had that bonus one last week. So thank you very much for everybody who's listened to that one. I hope you enjoyed those episodes covering cybersecurity and esports, two really completely different subjects, but both, I think, very interesting ones. And we're going to continue that theme today, talking about how our technology can be used and leveraged by different types of organizations of all different sizes. We spend a lot of time talking about the large organizations. We love to think about those, but we also must always remember that engine of our economies, the smaller organizations. We want to get into talking about those a little bit and how the technology is there to support all of them, regardless of size. So that's the main thrust of what we're on today. And before we get into that, I just want to quickly remind you that we run this podcast normally every 2 weeks. And we do a mix on here of technology discussion, but also the people behind the technology here at Cisco Meraki, but also those out there, some of you, of course, who are helping to bring that technology to customers. So whether that's creating interesting new technology solutions that stand on top of the Meraki platform, or it's, reselling our products and helping people to implement them. We're so grateful to all of you, and we love to tell your stories. So if you would like to get those stories up on the podcast, if you'd like to be a guest on here or just submit some ideas, definitely do encourage you to reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter. I'm not sure if it'll still be operating Twitter by the time this goes out, but hey, let's see what happens. Twitter, I'm still on there for now, at Meraki Simon. If that doesn't work, hey, hit me up on email, simon@meraki.com. That still works as well. So just let me know what you think of the show and what you'd like us to cover on the podcast. Okay, so time to introduce our guests for this week. And first of all, I'm going to welcome back to the podcast Mr. Grant Shirk, who was here on a recent episode. What was that all about, Grant?
We were getting a little sassy. We were talking about the convergence of networking and security. But I don't think I realized on that one that I was talking to a true, original Meraki. You still have a first name at email address. That's an achievement.
Yeah, I feel quite lucky to bag that one. I think there are a few people at Cisco who've managed to do that as well. Not even just the CEO. So that feels like quite something. But I have not had that success with at cisco.com, let me say. But welcome back, Grant. Great to have you back with us again. And remind us what you do for at Cisco Meraki.
I am the head of product marketing.
Fantastic. And a debut guest we're welcoming today is Mr. Nick Barnes. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on here. We're recording this on a Friday afternoon. This is probably getting towards the very last thing that we're going to do this week. So we're going to relax and let our hair down and enjoy this one. Nick, tell us what you do at Cisco Meraki.
So I am the marketing lead for Meraki SMB.
Okay, and SMB, small to mid-sized business. How do you say that? Is that right?
Small, medium size, small, mid size. Whatever floats your boat.
All right. Well, I think we'll get into that in a minute. I know that this episode's going out 2 days after Halloween celebrations. Obviously, a very big deal here in North America, and of course, the US has been very successful in exporting that around the world. So I'm sure many of you have been dragged into some kind of Halloween celebrations in the last couple of days. Maybe you've got some candy lying around. But as an icebreaker, Nick, I'll start with you. What is your favorite Halloween candy?
Definitely not icebreakers. I don't know if you guys remember icebreakers.
Oh, nice. Touche.
Yeah, there we go. Now, we're not really big on Halloween. We don't do Halloween in the Barnes household, but we definitely do candy in the Barnes household. And so, whether it's Airheads, Nerds, Now and Laters, Blow Pops, Snickers, yeah, they're all. Just one thing for this podcast is I will have no candy corn slander on this podcast. Ooh. It's delicious. I don't care what anybody says. Listen, it's good. So, but yeah, I'm all about it, except for Mars bars. I don't do Mars bars. Everything else, we're good to go.
It's funny because I've been living over here in the US for about 8.5 years now, and I'm still learning all these candies and candy corn. I had to go look that up. I'd never heard of it. It's just not a thing back in England. So, Grant.
And that is a tragedy because I will say, Nick, I was scared for a second there. I thought you were going to go in hard on the candy corn. No, candy corn is the quintessential Halloween candy. Not only is it fantastic, and I will say there's a secret Slack channel in Meraki for people who love candy corn. You can find it. We accept all. There's a few doubters in there, but we're working on it. But come on in, join the fold. But I think it's so great because it really hits on a lot of like truly American things, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something you can eat in excess. It's fantastic. It is made almost entirely out of corn and corn byproducts. It's like corn syrup, solid, a little bit of honey, but it's like fake honey. It's great. And it's so completely manufactured. So it is like everything that is both right and wrong about American food. Like, there's probably a podcast on it somewhere, but yes, candy corn is my answer to this question, if you couldn't tell.
If anybody out there would like us to do a more of a deep dive on candy corn, we're always happy. Let's be honest, we like to cover a broad range of topics on the podcast. So, get your votes in, use that communication tool, and let me know. I can't really feel like I can join this conversation. I'll try and find some next week. For me, I mean, back in my day, it was like Quality Street, things like that, which is an old favorite. Strawberry creams. Anybody out there who knows those, you know what I'm talking about. All right, let's get into the actual reason why we're here today, and that is to talk about how the technology can apply to organizations of all different sizes. I guess before we get too far into that, I mean, when we think about these different business sizes, and how do we think about those from the respective roles that each of you have? You both do different things for Meraki, but how do you think about the different parts of the business?
I think where we overlap is on the products themselves, right? You think about product marketing, you think about go-to-market, like marketing lead for whether you're small business, medium, large. It ultimately lands in how the given technologies, innovations that we create and bring to market help our customers. I think what differs sometimes is like, what are the priorities around their problems, right? Because businesses, we generate problems, and so which ones we're focused on, how we're attacking them, what resources we have to put at them, depending on the stage, is the interesting part of the conversation. I think where we tend to split, me and my team, we tend to be focused more on what you would consider, or what the investment analysts would consider the traditional enterprise, right? Organizations with 500, 1,000, 5,000, 50,000
right
employees, and probably have dedicated networking and security teams. And so they have specialization, they have large scale and probably usually multi-site problems to solve. And I think it's the interesting thing for me, how I got into enterprise software and networking in the first place, is what are the problems these businesses have and how do you get to solve them? So we're focused on the large and the scale. But in many ways, we learn a ton from where Meraki had come from in the past, but also the kinds of teams that Nick specializes in over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things with the portfolio as well is that we definitely found in the early days of our existence that we were predominantly hitting these sort of smaller organizations, and made sense for them, and sort of helped to get them on board by simplifying the technology that that had been common in this industry up to that point. And then as things have gone on, we've found that obviously larger organizations have smaller branches, and they have, in many cases, thousands and thousands that they want to replicate. So the simplicity message works just as well there as well. Nick, how do you tend to think about it? How do you sort of define a smaller organization and think about it in terms of the Meraki portfolio?
No, I think and I think Grant's perspective is spot on. As it gets to more of the kind of the technical or the numbers game, I think that gets a bit messy, right? Some folks are 500 below employees, some folks are 999 below. But one thing for sure is if you have 90 employees, you don't have the same issues or concerns as a 999 employee organization, right? So, I think each business is different, and each size of the business is different. But as it pertains to what really drives me from a marketing perspective is understanding not only their issues that they have day to day, but how they work on solving those issues, right? So if you think about somebody with a small organization, they have one or two IT folks within the organization, right, versus a bigger kind of enterprise with an entire team. Just the emotions around identifying the right solution and what that means, right? When you have a smaller branch, when you have 2 or 3 branches, and having that network go down, right? and you being the one person, right? That's
Hmm.
that level of of responsibility is a little different. And so how they research, how hands-on, how research-driven they are in terms of finding a solution, how long they need to find it takes us to find a solution, and so just small insights and the nuances I think are really actually drive to much a variance in what they decide on and for the end solution. And so yeah, and so as I said, I think there are definitions in terms of employee size, how much they spend, so on and so forth. But overall, I think the real nuance is the mentality, the day to day, what their care abouts are,
Hmm.
and how they come to the solutions that they come to. I think that's really where we can really understand more about them and serve them much better.
Yeah, it's certainly the thing which really stands out for me that I'm reminded of, that is a term that I've heard many times before and still do, is that you got to wear many hats. If you're in a smaller organization, you're wearing more hats. That's just the way it is. And that was even the case for us here at Meraki. I mean, when I joined the company, we were less than 200 people completely globally. And we had to wear a lot of hats. And certainly the folks who worked in IT here had to wear a lot of hats as well and be experts across multiple fields as far as they were able to be. So I think that's definitely a feature that I recognize. And then of course, as you grow, you get to get that specialization coming in as well. So, I mean, Grant, how do you think about the sort of growth experience and as you sort of transition from maybe a smaller organization and you start growing? What do you typically see with our customers as far as the sort of dynamic with IT?
Well, the hats thing is an interesting metaphor. And I know we say it a lot. It's a bit of an idiom, but there's almost a pendulum swing that I see happen as you grow through multiple stages of an organization. And there are these pendulums between specialization back to generalization. And
Mm.
you're swinging back through. So when you get to that point where you've hired, when you're small, right? And I come from a long line of startups. We didn't have an IT person at
Right.
all,
Yep.
right? And so your problems are not, how do I optimize the network? How do I make wireless work a little bit better? It's like, does it work? Because I got customers, right? And so
Yes.
someone is constantly hat switching.
Yep.
And then at some point you find someone who's going to hold the IT hat for a little while. And it's a bigger hat. It's got some more features. And it means you have to spend quite a bit of time getting used to it. But eventually, then you're going to inherit more responsibility. Like, Nick was saying, I'm like, okay, I've got two sites now. Which am I campus hat or am I branch hat? How am I working back between these two things, an IT person? And then all of a sudden, you get big enough, a couple hundred employees, maybe a few $1 million in revenue here, there, and otherwise. All of a sudden, the security and compliance people keep knocking, like, hey, who's wearing that?
Right. Yep.
And it's
So
kind of
true.
like an oh shoot moment. We're sort of like stacking these up. And so it swings back and forth. And at a certain point, the problems that you're trying to solve are more determinant of the hat that you're wearing
Right.
than the underlying thing. And I think that's something that we try to keep in mind is if we can help you solve the problem, then we're doing things right. Right? If we are just talking to you about switches or segmentation, like that's you probably don't care that much. If
Hmm.
you do, you've got a lot of extra time on your hands. But I was like, okay, I've got an auditor I really need to get this report to. Help me answer that question. I've got new requirements as I enter this new market or I reach this new stage as a financial services institution. How do I do that? Right? Like that's where we see that swing back and forth and how people's roles will change from
Right.
time to time. It keeps things interesting, but it definitely makes things complicated along the way.
Yeah, and I think that's why, not to push a hard sell here, but I think that's why we're at Meraki, we have that ability to really grow and help organizations grow, right? And so, I used to be in startups too, where it's who's the most technical person here? All right, you
Hmm.
you you manage, you go ahead and figure out how to get this Wi-Fi up, right? And going from there to a much more sophisticated, multi-branch, multi-site kind of situation. You have to have an ability, and you should have a partner within that to be able to do that most effectively, most efficiently, to be able to manage an experience and keep that experience consistent throughout that growth, right? And I think having the right solution is key there. And so, yeah, and I think that's what I said. Meraki, I think, kind of plugs that hole very well, and I think that's why we're seeing the success we've seen.
And then if I can jump in, Simon, before you're next, you brought up a really interesting point talking about the branch, right? Particularly when you look at financial services and retail, as you get to a certain level of scale, each of those individual sites is operating like an independent small business.
Yep.
Yes, they are probably reporting their point of sale information up or their general ledger up to a bigger org that has to fold it in. But at the end of the day, there's a site manager, a general manager, office manager who walks in every day. Are the lights on? Do we have network? Can I connect to my core systems? Are my employees successful? Oh no, I've got a staffing challenge. What do I do?
Right.
And so even at the largest organizations, a global coffee shop, an international bank, it is a business built of hundreds, if not thousands, of these small organizations. And that is the only way you can scale. And so being able to, the challenge, how do I operate infrastructure network when I really have a large number of independent entities that I still need to manage? And I think that's where great organizations learn on those two cycles, right? How do I scale and do bigger? How do I solve bigger problems? How do I operate at a local level? How do I operate and learn small, but then leverage what I get from the big? And whether that's business or security or networking, I think it's a common cycle that you see repeated. As you scale on the IT side, there are always some key things that matter. I mean, I think in some ways, it's not 100%, but every small organization, every small wants to grow, wants to find that next level of scale. At the same time, every large organization wants to find ways to operate more in a more innovative way, more autonomously, so they can go faster. There's a constant interplay between those two forces. On the IT side, that means that you are always faced with a few things. One, how do I do more with what I have on hand? And how can I stretch my investment? How can I bore out the cylinders on this thing and get a little bit more horsepower in the interim before I have to go and make I'm managing capital versus OpEx no matter where I'm at. That is true. How do I find better ways to engage my customers, engage more of my customers, bring them in? And then how do I make sure that all of my employees would like to stick around for a while, right? That idea, I think there was a fascinating interview I saw the other day. Chuck, our CEO, was on CNBC, I think. I'll be able to fact check me on this one. But he was talking about what is enabling or preventing people from coming back to the office. It's this big real estate scramble in the world. And he had this really great, it was a great line. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, we have to figure out how to make hybrid work a magnet, not a mandate.
Oh, nice.
I know, pay the copywriters on that one. But no, I think it's really, really true. It's, how do we make it desirable for people to come, work, collaborate, give feedback, do more, grow the business, versus force it? And that responsibility falls on IT, whether you are 100 people or 100,000 people.
And then, IT has to be able to underpin it, right? If we're going to make it a magnet, it's got to be something that enables people to work with zero friction, or as close to that as we can get it, so that they're able to feel productive wherever they're working. Nick, do you hear the same sort of thing from the smaller organizations that you talk to?
For sure. Hybrid work is a topic right now, and it has been because it needs to be. And the reason I say it needs to be is because realistically, it's important for an IT lead or an IT responsible person within the org, because we just talked about folks with multiple hats, to be able to ensure a similar or same experience, in this new normal that we're living in, right? And I think a lot of times we make the mistakes of either taking the employee side or the employer side, meaning on the employer side, it's like, of course, I want everybody to come in back to the office and work.
Right.
On the employee side, it's like, well, no, things are different, right? And especially for, if you want to hire good people, the expectation of having that remote and kind of a new setup is there. So I think given that responsibility and that complexity, yeah, it just makes that, of course, the IT person's job that much harder. But with the right tools, of course, it actually makes it, simpler, realistically. Being able to manage through collaboration, through VPN, through all these different tools and technologies that we have and that are available, especially through the cloud. So on the smaller business side, we talk about cloud migration. It's like I mean, they're there, right? I mean, it is just the way of life at this point. And I think that's one of the things that you see the smaller businesses being able to really adopt and adapt faster and to kind of lead the way in that realm.
Actually, that's a really interesting point there, Nick. Do you feel like just because it's so easy now to start up a business or an organization leveraging cloud technologies? I mean, the most obvious one that comes to mind, I'm sure for many people, would be something like Google and Workspaces and all of that, and Gmail and so on. I'm guessing really that therefore the concept of leveraging cloud technology and not having to have it all on premises must make a difference.
Yeah, well, you said easy, which I'm sure nobody's going to agree with if you're starting a business. But I think the point is, though, it makes the technology side of it much easier,
Right.
right? And I think whether it's you are a startup and you are on Google Documents or Google Workspace, or you're using WebEx or you're using these are just like the kind of like the blood that flows through your organization to make it go. And so the idea of cloud is just and also there's the idea of just like managing budgets, right? And not paying more for what you don't need and so paying as you go kind of vibe. So I think that's just a core kind of component to a smaller business because, they're looking at those numbers and they're looking at how to make that run rate extend, right? And so I think it's part of the day to day. The question is, how do we optimize, or how do they optimize, find the best solutions that are cloud based, and then create a work environment that, regardless of where you are in your workspace, it's the same and it feels the same and it feels productive and it feels collaborative. And so,
So I guess then the interesting question is, how do you retain that as you start to grow? How do you retain that continuity of easy, low friction workspaces and the hybrid work component that we were talking about there as you start to grow? And it's easy to imagine, and I'd love to test this actually. It's just pure hypothesis in my head, is I have to imagine that there's a lot of smaller organizations who are actually more switched on to this and more kind of just able to conceptualize the use of the cloud for all kinds of different aspects of their business than some of the larger, more established operators who maybe have some legacy IT systems. They maybe got some old processes that they're trying to work through and update. Is that a reality? Am I guessing about right there, Grant?
I think that is a large part of the reality. I think it's not a lack of desire to move to more flexible operating models. The cloud operating model writ large has been shown time and time again to be more agile, more resilient, more flexible, and in many ways fueling more innovation. However, for many organizations, they have years, if not decades, of investment in infrastructure, in process, in audit, compliance, very important, critical things that protects them, protects customers, protects people. And pulling new technology or new approaches through that needs to be a deliberate change. What I think, in some ways, large enterprise is learning from smaller organizations to see what's working at what scale. How do I prioritize this? When you've connected point A to point B, how did you do it? How can we learn from those and then incorporate into that scale? Maybe we see this a lot across our networks, test it in a branch, test it in a subdivision, see how it works, then roll it back up through. So again, learn and test small, scale big. But then the flip side of that, and I think, Nick, you were talking about this on the hybrid work transition, or really the remote work panic from a couple of years ago, the companies who were in the best position to do that effectively were the large companies. Yes, they had lots of process. Yes, it was a completely foreign thing, but they had the resources to drop infrastructure in people's homes. they had the infrastructure to support a massive network load for more video, more audio, more connectivity. And from that, and from our side, the way we used that is we were able to say, hey, look at what our biggest customers were doing, whether it was with the Z3 or better WAN insights on the network, and say, okay, they were able to do that. How can we, and we're going to wait for the magic S word from Meraki, how can we simplify this to make it more accessible to more people? How can we learn from the successes of the bigs and then apply that to everyone? That's what I love about our cloud platform, our approach, is because we do bridge these worlds.
Right.
And so we can take the innovation and the crazy new ideas and the fun, get it going at on the small end of things, get it going with the businesses who are going to prioritize that or can prioritize it, figure out how to scale it, institutionalize it, carry it up. And then whether it's teleworker or I think Nick, you and I were talking about MDM, device management, UEM earlier. How do we take that? Oh, wait, I've got 4 mobile devices per person and it's just chaos. How do I distill that and simplify it so companies can start with a better security posture for devices and data? And it's this great, I mean, it's kind of like the closed loop writ large. Have we talked about the closed loop model on your podcast before? We must have 90 episodes in, right?
It may be back there somewhere. Nothing's coming to mind, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, certainly that concept, it rings true for sure. Yeah, I think one of the interesting aspects of what we're talking about here is the way in which, if you like, at the risk of oversimplification, small can learn from large can learn from small, right? And that's something that we definitely see from both sides. So since we're talking to customers at all different levels, and of course we're selling them essentially the same technology right across the board, but it's how they implement them, how it fits with the stage that they're at as an organization. I mean, Nick, do you see any other kind of dynamics here that help to explain, as you think about it, right? The learnings of large from small and small from large. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's, Graham put it very well. It is a cycle, right? Of as you're smaller, you have budgets, but you also have flexibility. You have much smaller sales cycle, right? You're not thinking about, getting, product for 6 months from now, right? You're thinking about what you need in the next week or so. It's to stand up your organization, to stand up your business, to figure out the office situation. And so I think that flexibility and that urgency drives a level of what's the right word here? Of understanding and research and being able to fully grasp what you need for your organization in the immediacy. And I think that urgency, though is not shared to a certain extent on the big organizations, leads to decisions and leads to small organizations testing technologies and testing new structures that inevitably larger organizations will adopt once they see it working or see it not working, right? And so there also is, though, some, I think an advantage to being small where whether it is different brands or different types of technologies, teleconferencing, for example, being able to swap in and out. Like, okay, that doesn't work. I'm not going to say any names, right? I was on this, it didn't work, so I switched to WebEx, right? I was on this other. And so I think there's an advantage to that, being able to test and being able to try things and find out what works for your organization. But as Grant alluded to, big organizations can kind of sit back and say, okay, that looks good, or that works, so let's now adopt it. So I think, as I said, it's a needed thing. A small catamaran can turn pretty quickly, but a big ship, it takes a long time to move to change directions. And so I think there are pros and cons to each approach, but as I said, having the right platform that's flexible enough to manage both is invaluable.
Yes. And also give the opportunity to experiment as well. And I think that was an interesting one that you touched on there. I'm picturing that sort of really small organization, the ones that are just getting started, kind of barely out of mom and pop stage, if you like, is that the kind of character that you can imagine, this sort of stereotype IT guy. This is somebody who has the latitude to be able to go and try different things and to try and find a solution that's going to work well, and may also be able to look at some new and more innovative ways of doing things. So a classic case that's coming to mind for me is around the APIs that we introduced a few years ago, and now it's obviously fully integral with what we do. But at one time, that was a completely new concept for network engineers, right? That is just not how you build networks. You have all these protocols, and you just click on the screen, or you type it in a command line to make your network happen. But suddenly, this world of APIs opens up imagination to all kinds of different solutions. And of course, that's one we love to touch on in the podcast, is the sort of tech partner world. Maybe there's a solution that can help a small business that can be, that can sit on top of the Meraki platform. So that for me feels like a very exciting aspect of just having that flexibility and freedom before those processes get too sort of locked in and to grant to your point around compliance. I mean, it's inevitable at some point, right? But getting the balance right is essential.
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know. I have a bit of a, I hate to say contrarian, because anytime you say I'm a contrarian opinion on this, like, you just sound like everybody else. It's the catch-22 of working in tech.
I almost did a Python there and said, "Oh no, you're not." Keep going.
You should have, but then you did, which was great. So there is that. And I think some of that is the myth of the startup, the myth of the small business, is that I can experiment my way through this, or I have all of this flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, I've actually found it to be a little bit of the other way around. And I will bring this back to where you were going, but when you're small, if there is one of you, again, how much time do you have in all of your hat changing,
right,
to put on the experiment hat? You don't have a dabbling hat that you have a ton of time with. If you do, it's great, but then you have to wear that hat with like the sunglasses of risk, right? we're gonna abuse this, because like if you're small and you make a major miscalculation, that can have an outsized impact. Versus if you are one person, a leader on a team who's dedicated to infrastructure, to growth, as you will get when you scale up a little bit more, you can carve out those projects. Mm-hmm. And they truly become 20% projects in the actual sense, not the Google sense, which is 120% projects, right? Yep. You have the time to think them through, find the impact, and drive that. So there's a balance you do have to strike between those two. But the API and the platform is an excellent example, in my opinion, of how that ideal can play out at different sizes. Mm-hmm. Because on Meraki, it's not just the APIs. It's like, yes, there are a ton of incredibly intelligent customers and people who are out there building amazing things, raw, off the API, building integrations. But there's also these 200 rebuilt applications, like Salesforce CRM style, where if I am a small business, I want to go faster, I now have a vetted custom or semi-custom app I can just drop in and go. And so it does. There's mm-hmm. a balance between those two. But when you have this platform, it's like, hey, we've vetted the ServiceNow or the every angle integration across 400 different installations. It's going to work.
Right.
Small business. Now you can take this crazy idea and run with it.
Right. I love that.
Without having to devote all that time.
Really, I mean, what's coming out of the conversation, because you say to take a contrary position, but really what you're doing is enforcing, I think, the main thrust of what we're saying here, which is that there's a remarkable amount of similarity, right? As you look at right across from small to large, that there are dynamics and elements that really apply in both directions, just applied in different ways. I also want to say that I've never heard sunglasses of risk before. I love that. It might be my term of the week. Does that come from somewhere?
Maybe that'll be the next giveaway at the customer advisory board. We can do the sunglasses of risk.
There we go. That's not a bad idea. Let's see if we can get some swag made up.
So I actually wanted to chime in too. I fully agree. I think kind of piggybacking off what Grant said, I think there's an intentionality alluding back to the small versus large business and the experimentation. Because experimentation gives an impression of intentionally experimenting versus I'm small. We tried X didn't work, go to Y, right? And so, but I think the large organizations can plan for that. Small organizations just like, this is Tuesday. This doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Wednesday, we need something else. And so, but that flexibility, I think, is the core message here. And I think having a platform and products that allow that, I think, is the key takeaway.
Yeah. 100%. Well, I think we've done a really nice job here of making this point, and really, so we have a portfolio obviously that scales up and down, and really, I think has a fit for everybody, regardless of the stage they're at, the size they're at. But I think one of the interesting themes that we called out definitely in that, which is a common experience we're all going through right now as we try to establish new working norms, is this hybrid world concept. It really seems to work well for me. So I know we've been putting a lot of work into trying to support our customers and partners with that adaptation process that's going on at the moment. And what kind of resources can people access to learn more on that?
I think there's a few. Certainly, the Meraki hybrid work page is a great place to start, because I think no matter where you're at in that journey, from small to large, from large trying to act small again, there are some great ideas that you can pick up that have been learned from people like you, people not like you. And it's a great way to see how are other people solving this problem, and what deliberate experimentation might I want to try.
Okay, well, I want to thank you both very much for joining us on this one. I think it's been an interesting conversation. I feel like it's one where we could go on for quite a long time, just because, I mean, we've taken on a big topic here, right? How do you scale Meraki to every size of organization out there? Really appreciate both of your time on the podcast today. So thanks very much. And it's weekend time to go and enjoy that. Have you got your Halloween costumes ready?
Largely.
There's still time. There's still time.
So I have mine on right now.
Right.
Nice.
Well, I hope you both find the candy that you were alluding to earlier on. I think that feels important. And also obviously to all of you who are listening. So, and to you, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast once again. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and we've got an interview with somebody super important to us in our organization. I'll leave that a secret for now, so that you definitely tune in. If you're not already a subscriber, you know what to do. Go to your favorite podcast app, look for the subscribe button, and then you'll get, of course, this showing up right as soon as it gets published every other Wednesday. And with that, from the three of us, we're going to wish you a great rest of your day, and we will speak to you again very soon on Meraki Unboxed. Bye for now.